Okay, welcome back. This is video N10.2. I'm going to do this in two parts. So this is part one on getting connected to the network. First going to talk about the network adapter configuration. Then we're going to talk about the Allen Bradley BootP utility. In part two, we'll get to RSLink's classic configuration and RSLink's enterprise configuration. So the network adapter is how we adjust the software to facilitate the connection through the NIC card. The NIC card is short for Network Interface Card. It's the physical card that allows connection to the Ethernet cable, and we need to configure that hardware to talk on the internet, on the Ethernet, with the IP address necessary to make the connection that we want. So nowadays, NIC cards are typically built in to the processor and would be part of the motherboard, the main mother circuit board. So used to be added as an adapter, still might be in certain computers, but typically on a laptop it's going to be integrated into the motherboard. We need to adjust this to set its IP address. That's done through the network adapter configuration on your PC. We can do that through the control panel, through the network and sharing center, and change adapter settings. So if you just search for change adapter settings in your system search window, you can probably go directly there. Basically want to change the IP address of the local area connection properties on the Internet Protocol version 4, which is TCP IPv4, to the static IP address we will require for Allen Bradley programming. As you'll recall, all the devices in the lab have a static IP address, and we're going to want to be on the same subnet as those addresses. So the subnet mask filters out everything except the devices of interest on the same subnet that we are. The subnet is controlled by the rightmost last number, which is called the octet, because it's an 8-bit number and can vary from 0 to 255. So we want to filter out everything except those IP addresses which match the first three octets, which in the example here would be 198.168.1. And then the 100 is the last octet. So we would want all numbers that are in the subnet 198.168.1 and all of the octets from .0 to .255, which would be 256 devices, 0 to 255. So the last octet has to be unique for everything on our network, and we want to filter out everything else with the subnet mask. DNS stands for the domain name system or service or server, and it's an internet service that translates domain names into IP addresses. So domain names are more user-friendly in that they're an alphabetic name, but the internet really works on IP addresses. So the DNS does a translation between the domain name and the actual IP address. So here we have open the parameter dialog box to adjust the settings for our TCP IPv4, which is our Internet Protocol version 4 for our NIC card. And we got here through the control panel, through network settings, and then properties of the local adapter and pick the IPv4 adapter. Here we're showing that we want to use a static IP address, so the radio button here is clicked, and we are setting the static IP address that we want for this device, this PC, at 192.168.1.200, and our subnet mask is the typical default 255.255.255.0, which will allow everything in this last octet then to connect. If these three initial octets match, we'll be able to connect up to 255 devices in with this last octet. Down here we have a setting for the DNS, the domain name server, and we can set a preferred address and an alternate address. But since we're working with a static IP address with the Allen Bradley, we don't need to worry about that. And if we want to put our computer back to allowing the DHCP to automatically serve us an address, we would click back here, obtain IP address automatically. But for use in programming the Allen Bradley, we're going to put the static IP address here. Allen Bradley provides a utility called the boot P, and the purpose of the boot P is to configure the IP address of a device out of the box. This is a utility that comes with the Rockwell software, like the FactoryTalk suite of products, including Studio, View Studio, Machine Edition, and RSLinx Classic and RSLinx Enterprise. So we would find it under the Rockwell software folder in our installs, and we're going to take a quick look at that. Any device that is manufactured has a MAC ID address. The MAC stands for Media Access Control, and it is a fixed number that the manufacturer assigns to the device, and it's unique, and we have no control over that. Ultimately, we want to map that MAC ID address to a desired IP address. So the boot P allows us, is one way to allow us to do that. The DHCP server, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, is the network server that automatically provides and assigns an IP address. So when we connect to the Grand Valley system, Grand Valley's DHCP server automatically gives us an IP address. So we would want that configuration in the port manager we were just looking at. We would have to switch it back from static IP address to accepting an address from automatically accept an address assigned by the DHCP server. And we need to know how to switch back and forth in order to program Allen Bradley PLC. The NIC card we talked about already is our network interface controller, and how we physically get connected. When we're configuring the IPv4 address, we're configuring the NIC card, the IP address that it will have. Here's a screenshot of the Allen Bradley boot P utility opened and running, and we see a device that's being surveyed via the Ethernet connection. We can see its MAC IP address, so it's reporting. It's being pinged and it's reporting, this is my MAC ID address, and this is how we set its IP address. So in this case, this MAC ID, which is determined by the manufacturer, is being given the IP address 192.168.0.10, and a description can be added here. So this is how we could configure something out of the box. This is one way to do it, and I've done it this way. I'm going to end part one of the video here, and we'll pick it up again in part two for RSLinx configuration.